I am so happy to have all of you here.
On arrête la musique?
Yes.
Yes.
And to stop the music. That would be great if she knows how. I'll come back. But just being able to see all of you and to know that we're all in this together and that we are all in this group to help each other heal is so important, because obviously none of us wants to be here. There's not a single one of us that wants to be in this room right now. But for me, this has turned into a journey that's not nearly what I expected it to be. I've met some of the nicest people, and I have been able to read some of the most amazing books. And one of the first books that I read after meeting Ernie and Christine at the Logo Center was Quinton's Messages. This is a story of forgiveness. It's an incredible story about a car accident and immediate forgiveness on the part of Ernie for the young woman who actually hit the car and killed their son Quinton. It's filled with pictures. It's such a healing, uplifting book. And Ernie came and spoke about this book a couple months ago when we were at the Logo Center. And I think it was one of the best presentations that we had that night. And I'm wondering, can you guys hear? Am I too? She can. Okay, I'll be louder. I'm sorry. And Ernie's better about being louder. This is their second book. And the wonderful thing about this book is that it came out on the 6th angelversary of Quinton, which is the 10th of June, and Amazon had it ready to be ordered. I ordered it on the 10th of June. This is a little bit different. It talks about the continuation of their journey and a lot about the validations that other people around them have received, which is very interesting as well. But I just want to welcome Christine and Ernie to be speaking, and I wanted to say that Ernie is a board member of Helping Parents Heal as well, and we're very, very proud of that. And they're in Colorado now, but they came all this way to speak to him. So thank you so much.
Yeah, that's okay. Thank you. Well, many of you know that I love to talk, and sometimes I talk for too long, but I endeavor to not talk for more than 30 minutes. I'm looking at the clock right now. I want to first begin talking about our journey with forgiveness. So many people are impacted by what we went through and our different journeys with forgiveness. So I'll be talking about that from, again, our perspective, what we went through, not from a perspective of dogma. And then we'll talk about how Quinton came through and in numerous different ways, which that's when I get giddy because it was mind-boggling. Regarding forgiveness, my journey with forgiveness really started as a teenage boy. I was shy. You know, I had a tough upbringing at home. My dad was kind of violent, and I didn't feel like I fit in. My one release was I drove. I drove with a suicidal bent, and invariably I'd get behind the wheel and I'd say, "Is today my day? Please don't let me take anybody with me." Even at that age, 16, 17, 18, I had that thought in my mind. I don't want to be responsible for taking another's life, and I still drove poorly. At the accident scene, that came back to me in great force. The accident, it was beyond explanation. It didn't make any sense. As I shared in the first book, Quinton's Messages, we were 30 feet off the side of the road, stopped, pulled over, outside of our vehicle when a young lady fell asleep. No drugs, no alcohol. She was I think at the time 21 years old, and she hit me and launched me, and I landed, and After she hit me, she sideswiped our Suburban with so much force that the whole rig violently moved and then drove over the top of Christine. And I landed, boom. And I look up and I see my wife's torn and twisted body, and I just knew she was dead. And I rolled over, and there's my son. She wasn't hit. I mean, that was a series of ahas that I'm kind of breezing through real quick, and I can go back at any point in time this evening if you want to hear more about that. But I go over to my son, and he's essentially already gone. His eyes were open, he wasn't blinking, there was nothing going on there. He was still breathing, he was still winding down, and I stayed there with my mother-in-law and daughter went to Christine. The part about forgiveness begins with Amanda. Amanda was the driver. We've since gotten to know her. We've had breakfast with her, we've had lunches with her, we had a trip on the reservation with her that I talk about in the new book, Quinton's Legacy. But she, after she fell asleep at the wheel, drove over the top of us, she went off the side of the road and climbed out to that nightmare, that horror. She went over to Christine, and my daughter actually spoke to her and said, "It's going to be okay. We've got a good daughter, her name is Cheyenne." Christine at that point had been revived, and she was beginning the slow road to recovery. And then Amanda came over to Quinton and I, and not a word was spoken. I didn't know who she was. I mean, I figured it out pretty quick. She stood over us, and I looked up, and the horror I saw on her face. I mean, the horror was so gut-wrenching, it touched me right in my soul. And I looked into her face, I saw the pain, the deep spiritual pain she had in her eyes, and I immediately forgave her. And I didn't forgive her from a place of, reading the red print. I hadn't read the red print yet. I didn't forgive her from a place of, this is what I'm supposed to do. This all was happening too fast for that to be the case. I looked up at her and I saw myself. And that, I think, is more powerful than anything else. I mean, you can think about that for yourselves and draw whatever conclusions you want to, but for me, to look up at her, this person who had just killed my son, and forgive her because I saw myself, I think it speaks to the power of forgiveness. And maybe when things go wrong, depending on the circumstances, if we can realize that it could be us sometimes, that it could have happened to just as easily. I mean, that's kind of where I was. I saw myself. I'd done that. I had driven poorly. I had driven quickly. As an adult, sometimes I try to text and drive. I try not to, and look at the stereo, and it could be us in a heartbeat. It could be us that is responsible for the death of another or the maiming of another. And that's where I was, and I immediately forgave her. Christine, I want to preface and say Christine is far better than I am. She's a better person than I am. And none of you necessarily know that, but I do. Christine's an angel in my life. She's an old soul in my life to show me another way. Very spiritual, always been spiritual. I read all these books after my son passed, trying to understand, how did he come through? Why didn't I know? And invariably I talk to Christine and tell her what I've learned, and she says, yeah, I know. And it would drive me batty, because she just knows this stuff. This is who she is. She's an old soul, and I'm trying to figure it out. But Christine's journey with forgiveness is a little bit different. Christine died at the accident scene and came back. The morning after, I shouldn't even try to throw hours out there, but this is probably 12 hours later, 14 hours later. She was screaming for revenge. She was screaming for revenge. She was not happy. And, I had forgiven immediately. And my point is, she eventually forgave. Honey, you said it took you a couple years?
2 years, and I look back and I feel like I felt very ugly because I couldn't forgive. So I was such a forgiving person. But again, just about 2 years to really feel it in my heart that, okay, I can forgive one, because I know this is not what my son would want, for me to have that burden and anger. And because I saw my husband had been able to forgive, we took like reverse roles. He was able to forgive immediately, where I wouldn't forgive anybody immediately. But yet, it took me 2 years. But I had to go through that process. And he never looked down on me for it. We just kind of dealt with each other. And 2 years went by.
Yeah. So we both got there on different paths. And one of the points I want to make here is, forgiveness is such a, it's a hot button issue, it's a hot button topic. I have sat in some of these meetings before and talked about forgiveness and had daggers thrown at me. And I'm not preaching, I'm just sharing. I'm not telling you what you're supposed to do, it's up to you. This is what happened to us. But another aspect of it that, we've had to deal with is people will take that forgiveness thing and whether or not you've forgiven or when you forgave and use it as a catalyst for judgment. Not cool. That is not cool. I mean, we don't need to judge ourselves based on whether or not we have forgiven or we haven't forgiven or haven't forgiven completely. This journey with grief is not about standing in judgment of anybody. And I bring that up because I've seen this conversation turn unpleasant. And it's a tragedy. We've got enough to deal with. So, I mean, you heard me say that Christine's a better person than I am. Far better person than I am. I am blessed that she's tolerated me for 23 years. I didn't deserve her then, and I don't deserve her now. But she's still here. She's a better person than I am. But I forgave first. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Now, we talk about forgiving like we're supposed to be forgiving somebody else, like it's going to help them. I think that's kind of the gist of forgiving. We've got a different testimony. Forgiveness is for you first. It's for you first. You carry around this dark energy, this hate, this wanting of revenge, this wanting for something bad to happen to somebody, and how does that feel? It's real. It's raw, and you're entitled to feel it. I mean, there's no judgment here. No judgment in this group. Nothing's off limits. But you feel it. It's a dark heaviness. So when you find it in your soul, I mean, forgiveness doesn't come up here. I mean, you don't do it because I'm telling you to and I'm talking about it. You don't do it because you read it in a book. You got to do it from here first. And when it just becomes a natural thing, you just, whenever the time is right, I mean, it could be a month, a year, it could be a decade, it could be 2 decades. You forgive and you feel different. Forgiveness is for you. Forgiveness is for you, to let go of that dark energy. And it's just, forgiveness is such an important part of our journey. We've shared it. We alluded to it in the first book, Quinton's Messages. We shared it in much more detail in the second book, Quinton's Legacy. And this is where so many people connect with us. They just find it totally, completely amazing. I've said time and time again that the accident felt preordained because of the things happening before the accident, and we knew something was coming. In the courtroom, 1 year and 51 weeks later, after our son transitioned, because we know he didn't die, he transitioned, we're standing in the courtroom, and I was hit with another epiphany, and that was, this was preordained too. Our Creator knows us. Christine and I knows how we're going to react. And that courtroom scene was so unbelievable. It was so odd. It was like somebody had rolled out the red carpet and people didn't know how to take us because they're accustomed to seeing ugliness in the courtroom. And here we are asking if we can talk to Amanda. And I see the victim's advocate and the assistant DA look at each other and they're like, should we? We'll have to ask. Okay. They went and asked Amanda and she says yes. At that point, They had already heard of our first video, which is on Vimeo, and it's in the book. You can find it if you want, where I talk about our journey and forgiveness. And they're used to people fighting and being angry and cursing one another, and we're in the courtroom hugging. It touched, certainly it touched us, it touched Amanda, it touched everybody in that courtroom. Describing it today doesn't do it justice. It was an amazing, magical situation, very freeing. I saw Amanda, and I said, we've been worried about you. We've been worried about you. In the new book, all the court documents are there, and we say the accident was preordained, and we've learned volumes. She has something to learn too. Don't know that she's going to learn that in jail. So it was very, very powerful. So I'm right on point. I'm not going to run long. That's what I want to say about forgiveness. I'm open to questions and conversation. At any point in time, you can raise your hand and stop me. The thing that really set me up here today, set me on a journey to be here with you today, was my son's visits. My son's visits blew my mind. I didn't know it was possible. I had no clue. I was sharing with Wendy earlier, I always watched the programs from back in the day, Touched by an Angel, and what was it, Highway to Heaven with Michael Landon? Ghost Whisperer. I just thought it was good entertainment. And it touched me, it moved me, but I didn't think it was real, and for that matter, to make matters worse, if death was around, I wasn't there. I was that kind of guy. I couldn't fix it, I didn't know what to say, so if somebody I knew lost somebody, I wasn't there. I was one of those kind of friends. When my son died, I didn't know. I mean, my emotions were all over the place. And it's okay to be angry at anybody you want to be angry at. There's no judgment there either. We're entitled to be angry. Be angry and get it out. And don't let anybody judge you for it. Be angry and get it out. 30 hours after my son died, I'm laying in my room. Christine's in ICU. I spent the first night with her. And I'm laying there, and I feel my left hand being held. And I didn't know. I truly didn't know. It took me weeks to understand it was my son. But I knew my hand was being held. And I said, wow, that must be the manifestation of all the prayers. The prayers were just getting going. It took me a little while, but I realized it was my son. And I wrote about it in the first book. And I had somebody ask me, somebody brave enough to get in my face and say, really? How do you know? And I was like, whoa, I'm not used to being confronted like that. Of course, it had to be a woman that had nerve to confront me like that. And I thought about it, and I remembered my son has the softest hands. He's got the softest hands. And we always loved holding his hands. It was like he was holding my hand. 4 days later, it was 5 days after the accident, we were in Christine's hospital room. She had moved out of ICU and into her own room. And family's a beautiful thing. Family was there, and I was shocked that we were laughing at times. It was joviality, but at times it was dark. In this particular time, it was very somber. It was very quiet. There were tears. I was curled up in a corner, imagining my son alone in the darkness, which is an awful thought. That's where I was. When a friend of mine burst in, she says, I can only tell this once, so I've got to get everybody together. And we immediately think, oh Lord, what now? We can't do this. And she shared this amazing story about being approached by a medicine man in the lobby of the Marriott Courtyard. And the medicine man came up to her and grabbed her hands and said, I just finished performing a ceremony and I was sent to find you. The little boy sent me and he wants you to know that he's fine. So she comes to she comes to the hospital room and tells us all this. Tells us that somebody named Tom is helping him transition, telling us that he's it's almost cliche now, but I think he said he's in a better place. And went on to say that that everything's going to work out in terms of the settlement or the lawsuit. And I thought, wow, that's a lot of information. At that moment, it pierced my consciousness. I mean, this is what I hope for all of you. I hope and pray if you haven't had this, you get it. For me, it's why I'm here. For me, it's where the rubber meets the road. It pierced my consciousness. And I thought, my son still lives. I mean, the room and the energy in the room went from being this dark thing to everybody. And I thought, my son still is. My son still is. And I thought next, why didn't I know? And that sent me on this crazy, wild journey of reading and studying and learning and opening myself up to a totally different view of life, a totally different world. Later that summer, I saw him in his room. I wear his earring today. I've never taken it out. You know, I don't do piercings. I don't do tattoos, but I wear my son's earring. I was in his bathroom, cleaning it, and getting out of the shower, and the mist was coming off the mirror, and his room was across the hall, and I saw him walk across the room, and I stopped. And Christine says, "What are you doing?" I just saw Quinton. If I remember correctly, you said, "What, finally?" Magical. Didn't, you know, this is just an amazing journey. Didn't know anything. A couple weeks after that, I'm coming down the hall one morning at 6 a.m. and I hear, "Dad." That's my son. That's my son. And I know I'm not supposed to joke and have self-depreciating humor, but I do, because it's real. I'm slow. I'm tense. I couldn't react fast enough to say, "Hey, man, what's happening? How you doing? Tell me what's going on over there." I couldn't think. I was just marveled. That's my son. He's not dead. 4 months after he transitioned, he came to me in this most amazing vision. Not a dream. There's a difference between dreams and visions. And I speak from experience. I mean, what I've read supports it. But a vision, there was a vision before he died where I saw him die. Now there's a vision 4 months later after he's died where he comes to me and I see him. I saw his face for the first time since he transitioned. And I could see the expressions on his face. Number one, he was surprised I could see him. Probably because he knows I'm kind of slow. And he was eager. He was anxious. And I couldn't understand that. But as I saw him in my vision, I became excited. And I started yelling, "Quinton!" And each time I yelled Quinton, I came closer to consciousness. I think I yelled his name 3 times. And each time, the last time I yelled it, I was awake. And I was, the scene was I was outside. He was on the deck above me, and he's watching all this. He throws off his robe and jumps off the deck, and I open my eyes and I catch him. And at that point, I'm awake. But I feel the most amazing sense of peace undertook me. I knew he was with me. And if you haven't had that, I wish it all for you. I'll talk a little bit in Quinton's legacy because I'm always, I don't walk up to strangers anymore and share, because I was for a while. Now I only share when something comes up in the conversation. But I tell people, it's just pay attention. And it can happen in any number of ways. There are no rules. There's no rules. Sometimes your only cue is you think, well, that was kind of strange. That was kind of strange. Well, that's never happened before. Well, that was weird. That could be it. And sometimes it's so over the top, and you are happy to get those. I was talking to a woman once who lost her daughter in the most horrific way 20 years prior. And I convinced her to go see a medium, and I immediately regretted it because her energy was so dark that I didn't know that it would go After she went, her and I sat down and talked for an hour. She talked, I listened. Afterwards, she says, "What do you think?" And I said, "You know, about 10 minutes ago when you said, well, this was odd, this was unusual, and you know, about 30 minutes ago you said this was weird." I said, "I know what that was. Your daughter was there. Now it's up for you to believe it." This is tough. This is uncharted territory. I mean, we are here all of us here, we've lost children. It's not supposed to work out that way. It's hard to find, God, it's hard to find joy, it's hard to find solid footing. Well, if they can get through to us, they can. Question, or?
I was just gonna ask, you said after the accident, you kind of almost, it changed everything, your research. What was it like prior to that? How were you prior to that compared to that?
That's a wonderful question. I was lost. I was a lost puppy. I was climbing that ladder, baby. I was climbing the corporate ladder. I was making that money. Gave my all to the world. Everybody in the world thought I was a pretty cool guy. I talked to my wife, I talked to my daughter, and my son was getting to this point where if you asked him, he'd say, "My dad isn't here. He's not present. He's cranky. He's grumpy." I was lost. Part of my journey is, in the first book I share, these aha moments where I'd always been trying to find a medium, or trying to find balance, trying to be a better husband, to be a better father. And finally, what was it, 3 months, 2 months? I said, "Look, I need some help." And then things started happening. 3 months prior, things started happening, setting the stage. But I was a schmuck. Christine was going to leave me. She's admitted it. She was done. She just stuck it out. This changed me and made me a better person. Imagine that. Imagine that. I lost my son. We lost our son. And I'm a far better person. That's tough. Go ahead.
And that's a hard thing for anybody that has lost a new loss. I
That's
remember
right.
sitting here the very first time within just a month or so after Andy moved, and it was hard for me to listen to you
Thank you for being honest.
because you had accepted where you were at and you were embracing the betterness, and I didn't want to be better. I didn't want to even feel that way. There was no way I could ever look at this. And I can tell you that I feel the same way you do. I am a better person, but I've heard people say that, and that they wear their scars, and that their scars, but I would, in a second, we would take that back.
That's right.
And give up our scars and our
That's
betterness to have our children back.
That's right. That's right. And
So
it's-
I just wanted to share that
Thank you.
with them.
Because it's tough. It's tough to hear me say that.
It is.
I mean,
For
if
someone
you
new,
it's tough. I mean, you want to jump up and slap the crap out of me. I get it. And I'm not sermonizing. I'm not telling you what you're supposed to do. That's the key here. I wouldn't dare. That would make me the biggest schmuck on the whole planet. I'm here to tell you what happened to us. That's it. I'm here to tell you what happened to us. Quinton came through to Christine in some pretty amazing ways. Do you want to share about the earrings?
Quinton tends to come, I feel him all around me all the time, you know, and we just have that kind of a bond. But he tends to come to me when I'm in pain. And after the accident, like Ernie said, I was run over. I suffered complete body nerve damage and I'm arthritic, and I will be forever. But he came to me in a vision, and I had a pair of earrings that I usually take my earrings off when I go to bed, and I had it that night. Well, the earring had a lock on it, but it was, I don't know if you've ever worn your earrings to bed, and it kind of pushes into the side of your hair, and it hurts. And I woke up because I was in pain, and when I looked at my pillow, I saw my earring on my pillow. Well, how could it have gone up? It had a lock back to it, and it was Quinton. I saw him. In my vision, I saw him. His eyes were like bloodshot because he was feeling my pain, and he took my earring off. And that's the only. I mean, that's the only way I can explain it is he knew he did it for me, and you know, I believe, I trust and believe that he did it for me. I was in pain, and that he takes my pain from me. I feel any of my body aches, you know, he's there to comfort me when I'm in need of him. But otherwise, you know, I feel him like a soft, calm presence where that's how I get through in my days when I feel like when I need him, when I call upon him. But I thought that was very interesting with the earring, because how could that have come off of my ear? That it was him, and I just feel it was him.
So both of our books are, there's several, I mean, there's even more in the second book, Quinton's Legacy. But there's several stories from others. I mean, why? Because I'm not crazy.
Everybody has a story.
Right, I'm not crazy. And I mean, so I share what happened to us, and I have stories from others, you know, in the context of the book, so the reader knows it's not just us. And these are just people that we bumped into. It doesn't include the stories that I've read. It's people that Christine and I have bumped into, and it's just a small snapshot. And some of these stories about the visits from our deceased mom, dad, son, daughter, brother, sister are over the top, but they demonstrate. I mean, what are we talking about? Not from a biblical perspective. We're talking about our kids demonstrating to us, front and center, that life is eternal. They're able to visit. That means there is no death. Now I kind of go toward this in the new book because it's been 6 years for us. This is our journey. You know, and I wasn't at this point, you know, the first 3 years, 4 years. I was just like, wow, there's no death. Once 6 years have passed, and it's like, okay, life is eternal. That means my life is eternal. So that's kind of where I'm at now, and I talk about that more in the second book, Quinton's Legacy. The book's broken up into 3 sections. The first section is kind of filling in the gaps of these mystical experiences we've had. The second section is these amazing over-the-top stories, and I share, what I told you, there's no rules to signs. They come through any way they want to come through. You have to be able to say, wow, that was kind of strange, and acknowledge it for what it is. And at the end, Christine has a chapter, The Hard Work of Saving a Marriage. So many people, Christine annoyed her no end. So many of my friends came to me and said, Ernie, 90% of people who lose kids and marriages don't survive.
Why did they tell us that?
Annoyed her to no end.
Why did they say that?
Well, Christine has a beautiful...
I know, they do all the time. It's crazy.
Christine has a beautiful chapter on The Hard Work of Saving a Marriage. My daughter has a chapter where she shares her struggles. She didn't want to be here. And then I talk about, my burden a little bit. But I talk about what I've come, in my view on life. Knowing that my life is eternal. And knowing that I'm going to pop out of my flesh someday and see my son and my father-in-law and my dad and who knows who else. I'll be looking back at my life thinking, okay, what did I do? What did I accomplish? When I look at my life today, I can really kind of see why I'm here. And this is, again, in the book, when I get to this part, it has the greatest opportunity for you to connect with it and say, well, maybe I can see why I'm here and what I'm here to learn. Or maybe you say, oh my God, this guy's crazy. I'm just sharing what I've been through. I look at my own struggles, what I've been dealing with my whole life. My reoccurring struggles. It's like, how do you have this? Oh, this again. Really? Oh, this again. Why does this keep happening to me? Anybody? Yeah. Well, because it's an opportunity to do something different. Whatever that is. And I try to share some of my struggles just to illustrate what I've been through. And, in large part, I'm here just to finally be okay with myself. Finally learning to love myself and know I'm loved. And finally be at peace. At 50, I'm almost there. It took my son to whap me upside the head. My last chapter is titled Adversity. And we know adversity, don't we? We know adversity. I had to rewrite this chapter because I was going to give a history lesson about all the tragedies in the world. But the chapter got real dark real quick, so I had to rewrite it. And then talk about our adversity and what it's done for me, which I've already shared some of this with you. Part of my healing process is I am gifted and I'm blessed to coach high school football where I graduated from, Evergreen High School in Colorado. This is part of my journey with grief. They came to the services, the class of '83. One of the coaches whispered in my ear, and he used football language that I can't share here. And he says, "When are you going to stop messing around and start doing what you're supposed to be doing?" Another person I graduated with made it happen. So I've got a whole football team of sons. And I was on the field with them last Wednesday, and they were having a bad day. And they were getting sad and demoralized. And I said, "Boys, you and I are going to talk a lot about adversity this season. Adversity is a teacher. For me. We're still here. I'm still learning. And that's a gift. Our son is alive on the other side. That's wonderful to know. It's not a hope. It's not a wish. He's demonstrated that. We know it. We know we'll be with him again. I'm here because I've got more to learn and more to share. And that's a blessing. That is a blessing.
I love the way that Susie Ireland sums it up. Our kids are home and we're still in school.
Yeah.
And I totally believe that.
Yeah, I do too. I do too. In fact, that wraps up my presentation. I pretty much stayed on 30 minutes, I think. I think I did pretty good. I'm open for questions. Nothing's off limits. In our second book, we actually include a list of everything I've read, which is kind of crazy.
Lots of really good books.
The books that came to me first,
That's the key, I think, reading. So helpful.
definitely.
So helpful.
And it's
Being
hard.
part of groups like this.
It was hard.
I read everything I could get my hands on.
Yeah, the thought was, wow. And then why didn't I know?
I did throw a couple books away.
Because they didn't
I
resonate.
really felt like and I threw them away. So I did give myself permission to say, this doesn't.
Right.
And there were some that Ernie read, and I got to him and, I'm not really feeling this. I'm glad you felt it, but I'm not feeling it,
And we're all different.
Yeah.
We're all different. One of the first book I read, and I have to look at my book to see the title of it, it's by Jonathan Ellerby, Return to the Sacred. I can't believe I remember that. And early in the introduction, I think, he described death as going into the closet and taking off your skin, like we take off our clothes today. And it so touched me. But I read every Brian Weiss book. I recommend that. Recommend all of his books. The first one I read was Many Lives, Many Masters. If you haven't read them, give it a try. And Brian Weiss was a skeptic. He didn't believe. He sat on what he learned for 4 years for fear of being ostracized from the medical community. There's nothing like testimony like that. Dr. Michael Newton writes Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls. He's a PhD and he kind of writes like a PhD, but I ate it up. I read almost every James Van Praagh book. I've read a lot, and it just, if you read something and it lifts your spirits and it makes you feel good from the inside out, that's what it's all about. And if it doesn't do that, maybe you don't need to read it. I mean, we need that, don't we? We need something to lift our spirits and give us hope and give us a broader picture or understanding of reality, because what we grew up with today is really, what we're taught and learned is very narrow. To lose somebody and for them to come visit us afterwards, I wish that was on the news every day. It really should be. But we've got groups like this to talk about that. So that's all I have for you.
I have a question. It's funny because I did Brian Weiss's publicity on that book.
Really?
Years ago, when I was at the New York book. But what happened with Amanda? I'm curious about a little bit about her story. And you mentioned a lawsuit, then you said you're in court, and you said she fell asleep at the wheel, which means there's no real intention.
That's right.
And how is she today? And you kept in touch? I'm just kind of curious about
I owe her a phone call. The last time I talked to her was probably a year ago, and I go into a lot of detail in the second book. But to answer your question, she was up for three misdemeanors, 1 year each, and I had forgiven. I remember talking to the investigator, telling him that, looking at Christine, because her and I hadn't really talked about it, but she was going with the program. The short of it is she ended up spending 10 days in jail. And the judge, this wonderful, magical, odd courtroom scene, the judge seemed like he talked 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes on why he was going to rule the way he was going to rule. He was going to rule the way he was going to rule for her own mental health. Her own mental health. He gave her 10 days, so she knew she paid something for this horrible accident.
And she could have done 3 years.
She could have done 3 years. 2 of those years were taken off the table because of our efforts. Because we stood up, our court document said we don't want her to have any jail time because I stood her and addressed the court and said the same thing. Gave her 10 days. She's good. She's since had another child. She's living her life. That's all I can hope. Her life is her life.
She was remorseful from the time it happened. Yeah, and she
No
says
drugs.
that there was something for her to learn from the accident, and she learned. Then they're at the hearing. You know, she embraced us, and we embraced her, and we felt that there was something for us all to learn from it and take away. And she shared that. You know, thank you for for giving me and leniency. I mean, for the court hearing. But I've learned something. I was throwing my child's life. I mean, I was taking him for granted. He was 6 months old at the time, and you changed that for me. You put my whole life in a different perspective, and that's a blessing. Even though it took my child, it gave her life and her child. And like Ernie says, it's hard to see the blessings out of a death, but our life has been tremendously blessed since my son's death. And it could only be because of him.
Yeah. And we can say that, but, I would never, ever walk up to somebody and say that to them. I know people who do say that, they mean well, but how do you perceive that when you just lost your child?
Not well.
I mean, and there's timing, but there's really not a good time. I can tell you our journey, I can say this happened to us, but I can't say if you'll ever get there, and it's okay either way. Yeah, I was working with a coach, kind of a life coach afterwards, and she was a medium, and we were doing some classes together, and it had been 4 or 5 months, and I was already blooming. I was already like, wow. And she said that to me in a meeting, and I'm like, excuse me? You know who you're talking to, don't you? Because at that moment, I don't want to hear it. It's real. It's real. It's tough stuff. And Wendy and I were talking beforehand. I mean, and I know I annoy people in this room. I know I do. I did, probably still do. But I feel it. I mean, I'm more down now than at any time in the preceding 5 years, it's been 6. I mean, I feel the blanket of grieving. I'm allowing myself to feel a little bit. But my wife said all along, you haven't grieved. Somebody recently told me, yeah, we all thought you were just trying to keep your son alive. I'm just trying to share the epiphany, the wonder of what he showed us. But I still feel it. It's heavy. I mean, I can go play catch with my nephew or some boys on the team, but I can't play catch with my son. Oh, that's my pain. I'm human. I regress. Just like everybody else. Any other questions?
I have one. I'm curious to see, I know that you said that you had a struggle in your relationship. When your son passed, he forgave right away, you didn't. Were you mad at him? Like how was your guys' relationship during that process?
I was very mad at him because he took comfort in sharing what had happened, where it was hurtful to me. It's like, we just suffered this, went through this accident, and you're talking nonstop about what happened, and I don't feel like you're grieving.
Right.
So that you took a toll on our marriage, but later realizing, okay, he's gonna grieve in his way, I'm gonna grieve in my way, and my way was crying all the time. So it kind of distanced us a little bit, but later we found ourselves, we came back together. and realizing, we're gonna grieve differently, and that's okay. You need to have your space, I need to have my space. That's the way you're gonna do it, this is the way I'm gonna do it.
That's,
But we're doing it,
Right.
and we're gonna do it together,
I think that right there is why so many marriages struggle.
because you wanna blame, right?
We
When you're not
grieve-
doing it
we're
my
grieving
way.
differently. You know, we're grieving differently, and then, I remember she came to me once, she came to me and says, "You don't even care. You don't even care that your son is dead. You just want to go out and tell the story." The old Ernie would yell and scream and puff and puff. That Ernie said, "Let it go." I spoke. My first speaking came 7 weeks after my son passed. And I told some friends of mine that I need to talk before I can't talk anymore, before I'm too sad to talk. And I wasn't even going to invite her. I did, last second, day up. I said, "Hey, this is what I'm doing, do you want to go?" And she surprised me, she says, "Sure." And we went, and we spoke to a group like this. And it was so powerful. Afterwards, she says, "What did you say?"
It wasn't a story, you were sharing messages.
Right.
You were sharing things that have happened
Right.
through this
Glad you remember
journey.
that, 'cause I forgot.
Early on, it was early on. But yeah, it wasn't a story, it was Quinton's messages.
And we kind of started the journey back together at that point.
Yeah, that's when we
We got together
we
hand in
were all on
hand.
the same page, you know?
It's good.
If there are no other questions, I don't know if we need to take a break or not. We've got an hour to go, and I would love it if we could circle up. Each of you have a chance to share, whether you need to or not. If you don't have to. But it's all about being able to share what we're going through, what we need to talk about. And again, there's nothing off limits. There's no judgment here. There's only love in this.